Okay, we're in England, and I'm going to just very, very quickly rustle through these two vases to give you some tips. I bought them knowing they were slip made, not potted, and they were very, very good. Very good. They are very good value because they are slip made. So the reason I know they're slip made is because if you hold them top to top, the girth is identical. If you put them side by side, the height is identical, the colours are identical. If you put them bottom to bottom, the girth is identical. If you ever have the opportunity to take a pair of 18th century vases made by hand, you'll find those are not usually the same dimensions. And now you won't see it unless you put them next to each other and measure them. But you'll find, if you're buying them, whether it has lids or it has a collar, you'll see all the girth, you'll find the differences are different because the potter can't make them the same by hand, not exactly the same. With a mould, these are made by slip with a mould, they will be the same. So these are made by a mould, so that will stop them being 18th century or 19th century and push these up to 1950 or 60, in my view. And this is how they make them now, most of them. The umbrella stands you see, the Chinese seats you see, they're made by slip. I noticed inside one of them there is some spaghetti-like bits of pottery in the bottom. So after they've been made, they've been spun while the clay was wet against a fixed blade on a static table, and it has regulated the size, and these little bits get spun off. So some of them have dropped into there and been glazed in. This one hasn't got the little bits of clay, but you have a sort of textured interior, and I would and even on the bottom, and I would describe the texture as having the contours of condensation on a piece of glass. There's moisture in, you can see there's moisture, it's drippy. So fundamentally, very, very briefly, slip made, two pieces of plaster screwed together, bolted together, strapped together. Nowadays the modern plaster ones, very intricate fitting so they can be screwed together, watertight. They will pour liquefied clay, slurry, into the mould. It won't be full of liquid, it will be 2 litres I imagine on that one, sloshed around mechanically, moved at an even amount of clay on all sides inside, because there's no internal mould, it's just the exterior of the void, or the outline is coated. The plaster attracts the wet clay, it doesn't dry but it sets, and they want to have the same thickness of clay all around. They will make it thick at the bottom though, they'll let it sit upright, and if there is excess clay they'll pour it out. If it's too thin it will break like an Easter egg, too thick it'll be too heavy, they'll waste the clay. So they're made in a mould, they're made of liquefied porcelain. I think it's porcelain, yeah. Porcelain is very hard, very bright, it's vitreous, stain resistant. So they've made these two pots which are the same size, and they have painted 2 scenes on it, and if you look at these 2 front scenes you'll notice they're the same scene. The problem here, they're not a pair. They're a pair of pots in a way, but they're not a true pair because the scenes don't look inwards. So here you have a character in blue looking out. In this scene the character looking the same way. What should happen is this one should be painted in reverse, so they face each other. But I must say, I'm very surprised to say that there's no transfer work on these at all. These are painted completely by hand from scratch. There's not even an outline. They will have had a guide, perhaps tracing paper with some graphite spots where they could get the size right. But these are painted from hand. The characters are all different sizes. Faces are different. If you look and compare them, they're all different. And that's a really nice thing. I would suggest this is a Mandarin Palette. Now, Mandarin Palette is the colour choice. You have Famille Vert, you have Famille Rose, you have different types of name given to pottery, it's named after the colours. I would say it's Mandarin Palette, but it's not really a Mandarin Palette shaped pot, quite a bit here. The Mandarin Palette pot to me would be higher, perhaps with 2 handles, a bit more of a flare. So the Mandarin Palette colours, they have the pinks, you see, it's the pink that I'm looking at. Not a fashionable colour. Pink down here, the pinks up here. So you have Mandarin Palette style, you have 2 porcelain, machine-made, slip-made pots, non-potted pots, but you have hand painting, and the painting is very nice. Because it's a fairly commercial modern item, they haven't bothered to make the opposing pair scenes. So what do we got on the back? We have another scene. We have horsemen or a horseman. No, two horses have horsemen. Again, it's two of the same vase, not a pair. It's two of the same. Horses are going the same way. They should be facing inwards, or both facing outwards. So I've knocked them. I've popped the bubble. They're not 18th century. They're not handmade. They are machine made, but they're very nicely painted, and they're not damaged, and they're big, and they look $1 million. These look the part. So we'll have these on our website. They're in England for collection. They will not be silly money because they are slip made, but they will not be. They won't be dirt cheap because they're not transfer. They'll be somewhere in the middle. They're a furnishings piece, and they would have gone into someone's house, possibly bought in a smart store in London, who would have imported them from China. They might have been bought from Hong Kong, someone who went on holiday there or lived there. So I don't know the story of them, but I think they're desirable. They're bright, they're cheerful, they're not muddy, they're crisp, they're of a very, very big size. And I think that the fact that they're not ancient isn't going to be a problem with them in the future. I think that they are sufficiently well painted to hold their ground, to stand their ground. It's nicely painted. It's not just been chucked on like you see with some Chinese pots. I think it's been well done. One little comment, when they finish making them, with a real one, they will spin them on the turntable, and they'll often leave a little bit of virgin open clay at the bottom, so the glaze will run to the bottom, then there'll be a little gap, not always, a little gap. That's because this stuff here, if this runs and runs across the place where it's fired, and it is fired with excess glaze. Glaze is sharp, and it fires literally like a piece of glass. And if you were to pick it up like that, and there was a piece of glaze that had run, you'd cut your hand. So there are little things you can look for, things you pick up. These haven't got that. They have been adequately finished all the way around. No marks on the bottoms. So it's very interesting once you start to compare different pots. I hope that's been interesting. It's given you some tips there. Thank you.